There's a certain silence people carry when they know they've wronged you, a silence louder than any apology they never gave. You've probably noticed it. The way their eyes shift, the way their presence trembles when yours enters the room. They smile less, they speak less, they vanish more, and yet you never raised your voice, you never exposed them, you simply grew, you healed, you chose dignity over drama, and that's why they can't face you anymore. Because your strength became a reminder of their weakness, your peace became their punishment, and the very fact that you moved on without vengeance, it echoes louder in their conscience than any confrontation ever could. The weight of unspoken guilt, they avoid your eyes now, not because you changed, but because their conscience did. You see, guilt has a way of rearranging people's posture. It bends them in strange ways. They'll laugh with others but go quiet around you. They'll be present in the crowd but absent when you enter the room. Why? Because your presence carries something they can't hide from the truth they never addressed. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't curse them. In fact, you might have offered nothing but love, loyalty, and forgiveness. But guilt doesn't wait for judgment. It becomes its own courtroom, and they are both the accused and the jury. Every act of yours, the patience, the trust, the care, has now turned into an echo inside them, a haunting echo. They remember the kindness they couldn't match. They remember how you were always there, even when they treated your loyalty as disposable. And now that you've walked away, or even just stood your ground with quiet dignity, they can't face you, because facing you would mean facing the better version of themselves they chose to betray. They hoped you'd fall apart. They expected you to retaliate, but instead you chose something more powerful. You chose stillness, and that stillness, that quiet confidence, makes their guilt scream. It reminds them they crossed a line with someone who never would have done the same to them. And no matter how much time passes, no matter how many excuses they build in their mind, the truth stays fixed in place. They failed someone who only wanted to see them win. Now they disappear. They make excuses. They create distance and call it closure, but deep down they know they were seen, not for what they pretended to be, but for who they truly became in the moments when it counted most. They know you never needed revenge because their own reflection is doing the work for you. And that's the thing about guilt. It doesn't always come wearing chains. Sometimes it comes as silence, as avoidance, as nervous glances in familiar spaces, as sudden exits from rooms you walk into. And though they might smile in public or pretend all is well, there's an unrest inside them that only the truth can stir. You became that truth, and truth, no matter how calmly it walks, is heavy for those who tried to bury it. So let them avoid you, let them look away. That avoidance says more than their words ever could. It is a confession carved not from honesty but from fear, the fear of being reminded that you were real and they were not. Your growth exposed their stagnation. They can't face you anymore, because every time they look at you, they see a version of themselves that never existed. They see movement while they remained stuck. They see elevation while they clung to excuses. Your growth wasn't just personal. It was a revelation, a quiet, undeniable message that they had every chance to rise, but chose comfort over courage. And now, standing beside you feels like standing next to a mirror they can't bear to look into. Because you didn't just grow, you outgrew them, the very traits they mocked. The sensitivity, the overthinking, the patience became the very foundation of your strength, and now the roles have reversed. You used to shrink in their presence, questioning yourself. Today they shrink in yours, questioning everything, not because you shamed them, but because your progress makes their stagnation impossible to ignore. You evolved in ways they never anticipated. While they were busy watching, you were busy becoming. You turned your pain into power, your setbacks into structure, and your silence into strategy. You transformed in the dark, and now that you're shining, it burns them, not out of hate, but out of regret. They stayed the same patterns, same circles, same excuses, and the person they used to overlook. You became someone they never imagined having to admire from a distance. That distance, by the way, it isn't accidental. It's created by discomfort, because being around you now requires them to face the reality that they didn't change when they could have. That they laughed when you were trying, scoffed when you were dreaming, and left when you needed belief. Now you're everything they never expected, and your very presence dismantles the lies they told themselves. You remind them of what they could have achieved. You remind them of the time they wasted doubting, judging, and underestimating. And when a person refuses to change, they begin to resent those who do. That resentment becomes avoidance. It becomes silence. It becomes sudden indifference. But make no mistake, it's not peace they're choosing. It's escape. An escape from the accountability your evolution demands. Because growth doesn't just change you, it changes the atmosphere. It forces people to rise or retreat. And when someone chooses stagnation long enough, the light of another's progress becomes unbearable. So they disappear. They call you different now, too distant, too ambitious, too much. But what they're really saying is, you became too honest a mirror. A mirror that shows them what it looks like to stop blaming the world and start becoming who you were meant to be. And not everyone's ready for that kind of reflection. So let them walk, let them hide. Let them make peace with their limitations, because you weren't meant to dim just to make others comfortable in their shadows. Keep rising, keep shining. Let your growth continue to be the reminder that evolution is always a choice, and you chose it. They can't control what they can't intimidate. They can't face you anymore because the grip they once had on you is gone. You're no longer the person who guessed your worth every time they disapproved. You no longer flinch at their silence or shrink at their sudden coldness. The power dynamic has shifted, and it didn't require a confrontation. It only took your evolution. And now, your calm is louder than their manipulation ever was. Once upon a time, they thrived on your need for their approval. They played games with your emotions, withdrawing warmth just to see you chase it. But now, you no longer chase. You no longer respond to bait. You see through it all, and that's what they can't handle. Because when someone's control is rooted in your emotional reactions, your stillness becomes your rebellion. You've learned to protect your peace. You've mastered the art of pausing before responding. You walk away without slamming doors, and you detach without needing to explain. That's what unsettles them. They don't know where they stand with you anymore, and that loss of control is unbearable to someone who once dictated your every emotional move. They can't predict your next step because now you lead the rhythm. Not through revenge, not through pride, but through a quiet strength that refuses to be disturbed, and that terrifies them, because deep down they never expected you to heal. They expected you to react forever, to live under the weight of their moods, to dance to the rhythm of their inconsistency. But something changed in you. You saw the pattern. You chose to stop playing. And they haven't figured out how to reach the version of you that no longer bleeds when poked. You've become immune to the tactics that once pierced you. You're no longer swayed by emotional manipulation or guilt disguised as concern. They can't face you not because you're aggressive, but because you've become unshakable. You used to explain yourself. Now you just exit. You used to beg for clarity. Now you give yourself closure. And that shift, that calm independence, makes them feel small in a way they don't know how to process. Control is a subtle addiction, and they were used to having it. But you broke the cycle. You broke free. And when someone can no longer control how you feel, they start losing their place in your story. So they disappear. They act distant. They call you cold, changed, or unreachable. But the truth is, they just don't know how to exist in a world where you are no longer afraid of losing them. They can't intimidate you anymore, and that means they can't own you anymore. Let them call it whatever they want. You didn't become hard, you became whole, and wholeness is the one thing manipulation cannot survive. Presence that carries memory. They can't face you anymore because your presence carries something heavier than confrontation. It carries memory. You don't have to speak. You don't have to remind them of what they did. Just being in the room is enough, because the truth is, when you were in their life, you were all in, loyal without question, supportive without limits. You remembered their silent battles, their birthdays, their unspoken insecurities. You stood beside them when they had nothing to offer but inconsistency. And now, your very presence is a living archive of all the moments they mishandled you. That's the weight they can't carry. You are the reminder of every moment they dismissed your kindness, every second they thought you'd never walk away, every gesture of yours they took without ever returning. You were their safe place, and they turned it into a battlefield, and now they can't look you in the eye. Not because you're bitter, but because you're better. Because even after everything, you're still walking with grace, still standing with dignity, still showing up in the world without bitterness carved on your face. And that stings more than any revenge. You remind them of the person they could have been if they had just matched your heart. Your peace is unsettling to them. Your silence is louder than screams, because it forces them to sit with the reality that they lost something irreplaceable. They might tell others you changed, they might try to repaint the past, but they know, deep inside, they remember how you showed up, and being around you now. It's like being haunted by the best thing they ever had, but didn't know how to treat. The kindness you gave, still lingering in their memory, the forgiveness you offered, still echoing in their conscience, the love you poured, still resting in the empty space they now feel but can't fill. You didn't ask them to carry guilt. You didn't seek revenge. You just moved on. But the weight of what they lost follows them, and that's why they avoid you. Because facing you would mean facing the best parts of themselves, the parts they ignored, abandoned, or betrayed when it mattered most. You became the evidence of a chapter they wish they could rewrite, not because you're angry, but because you remind them of what they should have cherished. Let them look away. Let them keep their distance. The truth doesn't need validation. It only needs time, and in time they'll realize it was never your absence that hurt them. It was your presence, pure, whole, unshakable, that exposed the gap between who they were and who they claimed to be. And that memory, that's something they'll carry long after you've moved on. The fear of your peace they can't face you anymore, because nothing unsettles the guilty more than the sight of someone they tried to break. Walking around whole, not angry, not vengeful, just at peace. That peace isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention, but it radiates with a strength that can't be faked, and it shakes the very foundation of those who once took pride in your suffering. They expected you to crumble, to act out, to beg, to lose yourself trying to hold them, please them, fix them. But instead you got quiet, you stepped back, and you did something they never thought you would. You healed. You didn't just move on, you transformed. And that transformation didn't require them. It didn't need their validation, and that's where the fear began. Because now, your peace speaks volumes about the chaos they brought. It reflects every storm they tried to drown you in, and how you learned to swim without them. Your calm presence is a direct contradiction to the narrative they've built about you. They might have painted you as dramatic, emotional, unstable. But here you are, still strong and unaffected. That's terrifying to someone who built their identity on believing they held power over your emotions. Peace becomes dangerous in the hands of someone who was once controlled through fear, silence, or shame. Because now they can't read you. They can't provoke you. They can't find the old triggers that used to work. And that kind of self-mastery, it exposes their lack of control. They don't avoid you because you're hostile. They avoid you because your peace convicts them. It calls out everything fake in them without you saying a word. It reminds them that they tried to define you by your wounds, but you outgrew every label they tried to stick to your name. You see, They never expected you to survive without them. They thought they were necessary to your story, but your healing rewrote the narrative. And now, being near you feels like standing in front of a life they could have helped build, but chose to sabotage. That's why they scroll past your name, avoid your eyes, exit the room when you enter, because you've become proof. Proof that peace is possible, that growth is real, that healing is louder than revenge. And that love doesn't make you weak, it made you wise. So when they look at you now, they don't just see who you are. They see everything they're not. And that realization, no matter how deeply buried, is why they can't face you. You didn't have to win loudly, you didn't need applause, you just chose peace. And for them, that's the most unsettling ending of all.